Hello and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Szeltner in our Washington, D.C. studio. It's good to have you here with us. In top pro-life news, abortions are up, healthcare services are down. Those are the latest findings from Planned Parenthood's annual report released last week. The 2015 to 2016 report came out about 6 months later than the typical release date. The raw data reveals Planned Parenthood performed more abortions than the previous year, a total of 328,348. While the abortions increased, the number of Planned Parenthood patients decreased. The report also reveals abortions outnumbered the amount of breast exams that were performed. A pregnant Christian high school teen banned from her high school's graduation receives her diploma at an alternate ceremony. 18-year-old Maddi Runkles got her high school diploma at a private Virginia ceremony one day after her Heritage Academy classmates received theirs. The small Christian school said Maddi would not be able to walk because she broke the school's rule on abstinence. Maddi's story has sparked a national discussion on how to respond to teen pregnancies. We were at Maddi's private graduation ceremony and will bring you a full report later in the show. A leaked draft reveals the Trump administration may plan to let employers opt out of providing no-cost birth control to women for religious and moral reasons. The Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, has a contraceptive mandate requiring employers to provide birth control. But religious groups, including EWTN, say this mandate infringes on the freedom of conscience. The White House refused to comment on the leak, calling the 125-page document posted online an alleged draft. Joining us now is Marilyn Musgrave, a former U.S. representative from the state of Colorado and the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Susan B. Anthony List, and Monste Alvarado, the Executive Director of Becket, a law firm dedicated to defending religious liberty, which represents clients including the Little Sisters of the Poor and EWTN. Thank you both for being here.
It's good to be here.
Thank you for having me.
Just last month, President Trump invited the Little Sisters of the Poor to the White House and said, "Your long ordeal will soon be over." Will this leaked draft fulfill that promise? What do you think?
Definitely. If this is adopted the way that it's written, which again, it's a leak, it's a draft, it would give them the existing exemption that they've wanted and that they've given to Visa and Exxon and all of these companies, to the military. Everyone has an exemption except people who want an exemption for religious reasons.
And the Little Sisters of the Poor have been going through this for 5 years. They really want to get to their mission and concentrate on that, helping the elderly poor. And we're hoping and praying that this is going to give them the religious liberty that they need. And also EWTN,
That's right.
Susan B. Anthony List, we need this too.
That's right.
Yes, we do.
Monste, can you break down your client's argument and why the contraceptive mandate is, in fact, a burden?
Of course, it's a huge burden. You're asking a religious order who serves the poor to violate their conscience. You're telling them that they have to not only pay for but also provide and practically endorse the use of these services and these drugs and devices that take life.
Congresswoman, based on appointments that President Trump has made and the administration, are you hopeful that relief will be given to the Little Sisters of the Poor and to other religious groups? What do you make of the
I'm very hopeful, and quite frankly, Vice President Pence is just committed pro-lifer, and he gets this. Religious liberty is up there with one of the most important things that we have. So I'm very encouraged by this and hope that this day will come, and Little Sisters of the Poor, again, ought to be about going about their mission, and organizations like ours should not be forced to do this, violate our conscience. And people need to remember, it also included abortion-inducing drugs. This is not just contraception.
That's right.
It's also chemical abortion.
Now, Monste, the Little Sisters of the Poor and other religious groups, their case went all the way to the Supreme Court, then was sent back down to the lower courts. What's happened since? Is there any update that we should know about?
Sure. So they've won 5 times against the Obama administration, and this last time, a year ago, we just came up on that anniversary. They were sent back to the lower courts for negotiations, and this leaked draft would be the product of those negotiations, but it's not the end. Once they have this regulatory relief, once the agency gives them the exemption that they need, they also need to win their cases in court. So we're waiting for this lever number 1 to shift, and then you also need the second piece. So it's not over once we have a rule.
And then we'll continue to monitor that. Now, Congresswoman, while I have you here, we'll have a story later on Maddi Runkles, this 18-year-old Christian teenager who is pregnant. She was not allowed to walk at her graduation. It's really sparked a national discussion when it comes to how we approach and respond to Christian teen pregnancies.
Well, I have to respond in a very personal way. At a family gathering recently, got a big hug from my nephew. His mother got pregnant when she was 16 years old. And, you know, I love him. I love his wife, his 2 children, my sister-in-law. And, you know, Maddi could have gone through her graduation after an abortion. She could have worn the gown. She would have had a baby bump. You know, no one had to really know, but she made a very courageous decision. And, you know, I looked at the website of the church that gave her a graduation ceremony, and I loved what it said. We're not perfect, but we know the one who is. Keeping our eyes on Jesus, we hope to become a little more like him every day. I thought that said it all for the church that embraced this young woman who made the hard decision and kept her baby. I'm very, very encouraged by that.
It really has sparked a lot of attention, a lot of discussion. Spoke with the principal this week, and you know, him saying how his purpose is to send a message against premarital sex. So once again, it is a very complex discussion. Grateful for your insight. Thank you for sharing that personal anecdote. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
A new draft of the contraceptive mandate recently leaked online would give relief to the Little Sisters of the Poor, EWTN, and other pro-life groups. The contraceptive mandate put in place by former President Barack Obama forced organizations like these to violate their consciences by providing contraception and abortion-causing drugs in their health insurance plans. The new rules would protect these groups so they are not required to violate their conscience. But now the Trump administration needs to move forward on this update and fulfill its promise. With that, here is this week's call to action. If you believe groups like the Little Sisters of the Poor should be free to live out their faith without being forced to violate their conscience, go to your computer right now, open up your web browser, and type in prolifeweekly.com. Here is how you can take action. Type in your basic information and simply click to submit it online. By doing this, you are telling the Trump administration to move forward with new rules to give relief to the Little Sisters, EWTN, and other organizations that object to being forced to pay for contraception and abortion-inducing drugs and devices and health insurance plans. The president needs to fulfill the promise he made last month that this ordeal will soon be over. You too can support the decision to defend conscience rights of pro-life Americans. Once again, go to prolifeweekly.com to speak up for religious liberty in defense of life. We go now to Capitol Hill to further discuss the contraceptive mandate and other top pro-life news. New Jersey Representative Chris Smith co-chairs the Congressional Pro-Life Caucus. Congressman, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Last month, President Trump told the Little Sisters of the Poor their long ordeal would soon be over. From your perspective, Congressman, how important, how urgent is it that the Little Sisters and other pro-life groups get relief from the contraceptive mandate?
Well, there's no doubt that the Obama coercive mandate telling people that they need to act contrary to their fundamental religious tenets and conscience was an outrageous violation of the right to conscience. Little Sisters of the Poor, Priests for Life, and many other Catholic and faith-based entities across the country were told they have to do something that they just don't believe in and must finance it and subsidize it. Thankfully, relief is on its way, and I think this administration will be very faithful ensuring that the coercive elements of the Obama order are done away with.
Do you see freedom of conscience issues overlapping with other pro-life issues right now?
Oh, without a doubt. There's no doubt that the abortion movement in this world, not just in this country, are ever trying to eviscerate conscience rights, to compel health professionals, health entities, including hospitals. We saw that in California, and providers as well as subsidizers of care to pay for abortion on demand. That kind of relief needs to be done immediately as well by the administration. They've certainly signaled that. I remember meeting with the Obama people last year, including the HHS secretary, a meeting put together by Kevin McCarthy, the majority leader, and it was outrageous how they felt they could tell the Catholic Church that they had to provide abortions in their hospitals and in their health plans. That's coercion. And what do we believe? We believe in the sanctity of life, that unborn children are deserving of protection and respect, not dismemberment and chemical poisoning by way of abortion.
There's certainly some hope that will be following. Congressman, I want to get your take on some other news. Planned Parenthood finally released their annual report about 6 months later than usual. There's been a rise in abortions and a decrease in other patient services like cancer screenings. What do you take away from that data?
Well, the biggest takeaway is that Planned Parenthood is Child Abuse Incorporated. It is the abortionists in this country. They've done well over 7 million. Every 2 minutes, they abort a helpless unborn baby somewhere in the United States. And of course, globally, the numbers are even higher when you add it all up. So they're directly responsible for an enormous amount of loss of children. And I believe, like so many in the pro-life movement and in the faith community, that abortion is also very injurious to women's health, especially their emotional health. I work with, Project Rachel and Rachel's Vineyard and so many others that deal with post-abortive women. So we know there are two victims in every abortion, the baby and the mother. And Planned Parenthood, unfortunately, victimizes both.
Thank you for reminding our viewers that there is support out there for women who are post-abortive.
Oh, without a doubt. The response that is in every diocese, in every state, every county throughout this country is to say, is to help the women who are post-abortive, dealing with what the Planned Parenthoods of this world will tell them, does not have a psychological consequence. It does.
Congressman, thank you for your pro-life work. Representative Chris Smith of New Jersey, thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much.
Turning now to more pro-life news, at least 500 people have requested assisted suicide in California since it became legal last year. That number is based on how many people have contacted the assisted suicide lobbyist group Compassion and Choices. It's believed the overall figure is much higher. Assisted suicide is also legal in Colorado, Montana, Vermont, Washington State, and Washington, D.C. And in a ruling last week, a Massachusetts judge allowed an assisted suicide lawsuit to move forward. We'll keep a close eye on that state as well. Florida will become the first state to issue what's essentially a birth certificate to women who have had miscarriages. Governor Rick Scott signed a bill called the Grieving Families Act. Beginning next month, women whose pregnancies end after 9 weeks and before 20 weeks of gestation can request a certificate of non-viable birth. The bill received wide support from both Democrats and Republicans in the state. An abortion clinic in Pennsylvania's capital has violated health laws for the 4th time in 6 years. The findings were made public by the state's health department. Hillcrest Women's Medical Center in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, has been cited for numerous issues, including improper staffing, expired medications and medical supplies, and failing to follow anesthesia policies for surgical abortions. This is the same state, Pennsylvania, where abortionist Kermit Gosnell's clinic went uninspected for 17 years. And what's often considered a surprising statistic, most women seeking abortions are already mothers. According to the Guttmacher Institute, a research group originally part of Planned Parenthood, 59% of abortions are obtained by women with children. What is it driving mothers to get an abortion? We turn to an expert to discuss this and more. Gary Bauer served in the Reagan administration, including as chairman of President Ronald Reagan's Special Working Group on the Family. He now serves as president of American Values. Gary, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be with you.
So what do you think is behind this trend? Why is it that mothers are seeking abortions?
You know, it's a shocking trend, and I don't have an easy answer for it. All I know is that God made us with certain impulses, and women, mothers, are made to instinctively want to protect their children. Mm-hmm. And the fact that something is happening in our society or in the hearts of people that even mothers with children might be, for whatever their rationale is, destroying an additional innocent human life that they're in the process of bringing into the world, it is depressing. And as a culture, it ought to make us do some serious thinking about the messages we're sending.
If you look at the past few decades, there's been the introduction of the birth control pill, no-fault divorce. How has that changed the dynamics and breakdown of the family, and has that contributed to these abortion trends?
Well, I think one of the things that all these issues have done is separate sex from procreating and having children. And that's had obviously a big impact. My grandmother, my mother's mother, had 13 sons and daughters, and that was not that unusual in that era. It's almost unimaginable now. I mean, if you have 4 or 5 kids, you'll get stares, particularly in some of America's big cities, like, what's wrong with her, you know?
Right.
So I think it's really sad that we're particularly teaching young women that the greatest display of their femininity and of who they are and of their strength is not to bring another life into the world and nurture that life and raise that young little boy or little girl with the right values, but to destroy innocent human life. It's a sad thing. We have 2 daughters and 3 granddaughters, and the thought that any of them would ever be taught by our culture that destroying innocent life was somehow what you had to be willing to do to be a complete woman is something that I find just horrid.
Right. What a unique gift that women have, that we have the ability to bring life into the world. There was another stunning statistic the Guttmacher Institute has put out. 60% of women getting abortions are women in their 20s. I'm a woman in my 20s. So what is it facing my generation that we had in the family that is also leading to abortion?
Again, these are very difficult things to come up with definitive answers to. I suspect, however, that as feminism, as an ideology, quickens, that it sends this message, particularly to young women, that everything is possible. Well, that's wonderful. In a country like this, everything is possible. You can be a doctor or a lawyer. You can be a member of the military. You can discover new inventions and so forth. But I think increasingly we send a message to those young women, or you can just be a mother. Right. And, you know, and no cultures can survive without having a new invention every couple of months, but a culture that doesn't value motherhood and fatherhood as one of the most noble, perhaps the most noble thing a man or woman can do in their lives is a culture that ultimately will be in deep, deep trouble. It's
a culture that couldn't last. Nearly half of women who get abortions live below the federal poverty level. How can pro-lifers reach these families? What more can we do?
Well, you know, crisis pregnancy centers, of course, try to fill at least part of this role by providing food and clothes and toys and cribs and so forth for those women that choose life. You know, that's something that we probably ought to look to more. Some argue that because there seems to be this relationship between poverty and abortion, that perhaps we ought to increase poverty programs. The problem with that is, over the last 4 or 5 decades, poverty programs, checks from Washington, have tended to replace low-income and unskilled men. And so if a woman is having difficulty with the man in her life or the father of her children, and she knows she can get a check in the mail without him providing for her, or if the man decides, I don't need to meet my responsibilities, the government will take care of her and that child, it might actually encourage the kind of family breakup that we see in so many communities.
Finally, I want to speak to you about someone that you know well. Charmaine Yost recently tapped to the HHS department. What can you tell us about Charmaine and what this appointment signals from the Trump administration?
Well, Charmaine and I have worked together all the way back to the Family Research Council when I was the first president of the organization, and I got to know her very well. She's strongly pro-life and pro-family, and it's a really great sign for people out around America that still may be trying to make up their minds about the Trump-Pence administration, that when you see President Trump initially picking somebody like Vice President Pence, and now in key positions at HHS and in other government agencies picking somebody like Charmaine, it's a real sign that this administration is serious about supporting American families and promoting the sanctity of life.
Gary Bauer, thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
When we come back, we bring you the story of Maddi Runkles, which has sparked a national discussion among pro-lifers, and you'll never believe what one magazine is encouraging women to do. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Szeltner. A magazine claiming to support women's well-being promotes ways for women to harm themselves. That's this week's Speak Out segment. Glamour magazine has recently released 2 articles telling women how to perform do-it-yourself abortions. The first article profiles the group Women Help Women, which launched the first ever digital information service for medication abortion pills. It's called Self-Managed Abortion Safe and Supported, or SAS. 2 days later, Glamour led its health section with an article, Research Confirms You Can Safely Induce Your Own Abortion. To self-manage an abortion is a euphemism for a pregnant woman getting the pill Miferex, ingesting it, and taking the life of her unborn child. Glamour magazine, you may Photoshop and filter the pictures in your pages, but there is no way you can enhance and dress up the ugly truth of abortion. Shame on you for normalizing a procedure that can be harmful to women both physically and psychologically. Abortion advocates claim to be for women's health, but the tips outlined in Glamour magazine would leave women seeking abortions without any precautions of a medical consultation, examination, or having a doctor involved. How can abortion advocates claim this is safe for women? It is not. And as The Federalist pointed out in a recent piece, the Glamour article tiptoes around the point that women would need to obtain the abortion pill illegally. This abortion propaganda is another reminder why we need to be cautious of some so-called women's magazines. Glamour magazine, there is nothing glamorous about abortion. Remember, there is something you can do to counter today's culture of death by following this week's call to action. Go to prolifeweekly.com and tell the Trump administration to move forward on updating the so-called contraceptive mandate so the Little Sisters of the Poor, EWTN, and other pro-life groups will not be forced to violate their conscience. 18-year-old Maddi Runkles has ignited a national conversation on how pro-lifers respond to Christian teen pregnancy. Banned from walking at her high school graduation, Maddi, a pregnant student, was still able to receive her diploma, and we were there when she did. In recent weeks, Maddi Runkles could be found in the New York Times, Washington Post, and major network news shows. But on the first Saturday in June, Maddi could be found in a cap and gown at a Maryland Methodist church.
Let's welcome Maddi.
She's the only one receiving her diploma at this alternative high school graduation because she couldn't walk with her Heritage Academy peers the day before.
I want to thank every single person here, and there's more out there, but honestly, thank you to every single person in this room, because if it wasn't for you, I don't think I would have been able to make it through the past few months.
Maddi is pregnant, about 6 months along. It's a clear violation of the abstinence pledge she signed at her small Christian school. The 4.0 GPA student was suspended, stripped of her leadership positions, and banned from walking at graduation, a punishment other students who also broke the student pledge did not receive.
They delayed the discipline to all the way till graduation. I think it's also important that when we're talking about the issue, especially of premarital sex and then pregnancy resulting from that premarital sex, that the discipline is always administered for breaking that code of conduct, for breaking that vow of chastity, not for being pregnant. I think we need to be really careful with that.
Kristen Hawkins is president of Students for Life of America. Maddi approached the pro-life group with her story, and they encouraged her to share it on a national stage.
I realized that my story was bigger than myself, and I needed to use it for something greater than myself.
Students for Life and other pro-life groups have been rallying around Maddi to provide support both emotionally and financially.
So some of our supporters wanted to know what more they could do for today, and so they pulled together their resources, and we're presenting you the college scholarship for $16,000.
Based on the Guttmacher Institute, 30% of teen pregnancies end in abortion, and more than 50% of abortions are performed on women identifying as Catholic or Christian. Some see the school's decision to prolong Maddi's punishment as a way to shame her instead of applaud her decision for life. Heritage Academy Principal Dave Hobbs tells EWTN Pro-Life Weekly in a phone conversation, "Every student discipline situation is dealt with on an individual basis, on a case-by-case basis. To box discipline is not wise. The issue is not abortion. The root is abstinence. Here at the Academy, we felt we had to address the root of the problem. It is irrational for someone to say Heritage Academy did not let Maddi walk because she chose to keep her baby. Of course we're glad she kept her baby, and I pray for Maddi every day." The Catholic Church also teaches that sexual love between a man and woman is reserved for marriage, sparking a discussion on how to support the life of an unborn child without condoning premarital sex. Maddi and her family agree it's a balance.
We don't want to normalize the pregnancy. That's not what this is all about. What we want to do is we want to normalize the love that comes after those decisions are made.
No one celebrated me having sex before marriage. That is not in any way okay. It's not celebrated. No one is promoting that. But, mistakes happen. We're all human. Just because we're Christians and we signed a code of conduct doesn't mean that we're immune from making mistakes. So you just have to pick up, forgive the person, make sure that they are repentative of it. They have to be sorry for what they've done and realize that it was wrong. We just got to move on.
The Runkles family tells EWTN the child's father wants to be actively involved in the child's life, and marriage down the line is still a possibility. Maddi will name her son Grayson, a nod to God's grace, because despite the debate, Maddi has felt God's presence all along.
In the end, at the end of the day, Christ is all that we need, and He really is all that we have to get us through everything.
A story that will surely continue to create much discussion. That's it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. You can reach us anytime at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com. I look forward to seeing you here again next week. Life is a gift. God bless.